I took this company to the top, he showed me the door. Right when I figured out how to bury his career with mine. It was a Friday, 4:16 p.m., the hour corporate betrayals taste their sweetest. The sun poured gold through the glass walls of the 23rd floor at Stratex Systems, the light slicing the meeting room in half, just like the line that had formed between me and Tyler Voss. He sat at the head of the conference table, crisp navy blazer, custom-tailored like his words. Eyes smug. Posture surgically relaxed. I'd only known him for 3 weeks, but I already recognized the type: sharp haircut, dull instincts, allergic to authenticity. "We're going in a new direction," Tyler said, his smile polite but edged. "Nothing personal, Marcus. This is about evolution. You don't fit the metrics we're building the future on." I blinked. Not at the message, I'd felt it coming, but at the rehearsed delivery. 3 weeks. That's how long it took him to put a knife between my ribs. "You're restructuring," I said, my voice even. "After the most profitable quarter in company history?" He shrugged. "There's more to performance than past numbers. We're building a model based on consistent, scalable inputs. Systems that don't rely on individuals." I gave him a half smile. "Good luck with that." Across from me, the corner of his mouth twitched. He'd expected pleading, pushback, anger. I gave him none of it. I reached down, picked up my pen, clicked it closed, and placed it slowly into my leather case. "Thank you," I said, standing. "For confirming I was never part of the system. Just the engine driving it." Tyler didn't say a word. Maybe he was waiting for me to slam the door. Maybe he was disappointed I hadn't made his job easier by exploding. The truth? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I stepped out of the glass box and walked past the long row of polished desks, each one a clone of the next. Some of the newer reps peeked up from behind dual-monitor setups but quickly dropped their eyes. The veterans kept typing, pretending not to notice. That was the rule here: don't look too long at a man being erased. It might remind you you're disposable too. At my desk, I found the small pile of personal things I hadn't brought home in years: photos of my kids when they still believed in Santa, a signed baseball from a client-turned-friend, the coffee mug with a chip in the handle that no intern dared to touch. 7 years. I was employee number 12 when Stratex was just a sweaty dream in a former bakery on 4th Street. Back then, we sold hope and enthusiasm. Now we sold numbers, stripped of the relationships that made them happen. The HR assistant, new girl, barely out of college, handed me the termination paperwork like it might burn her fingers. She couldn't meet my eyes. We're required to remind you about your non-compete clause. Your exit survey is optional." I nodded, signed without reading. It didn't matter. Non-competes rarely held up in Ohio, especially not when the termination was sudden and without cause. But she didn't need to know that. Not yet. I handed over my badge, my work laptop, and the company-issued phone. The moment it left my palm, I felt lighter. Unburdened. Dangerous. "Good luck with everything, Mr. Hale," she said, voice thin. I smiled politely. "You too." The elevator ride down was quiet. I could see my reflection in the mirrored panel: clean shave, black suit, no tie. I looked exactly the same as I had that morning. But something was gone. Something had shifted. It wasn't grief. It wasn't shock. It was resolve. I'd been here before. Years ago, back when I co-founded a small logistics software startup with a guy named Darren Polk, a college friend I trusted like a brother. We were nobodies then, hustling hard, taking meetings in diners and hotel lobbies. Until the money came in. And Darren sold me out to the board during a strategic merger, painting me as the emotional liability in front of investors. I'd walked away without a fight, burned out and bitter, letting him claim the spoils while I rebuilt my reputation one client at a time. That mistake had taught me a hard truth: silence only protects the one with the knife. I wouldn't make it again. By the time I reached the parking garage, the early fall wind was whipping through the concrete corridors like a warning. I slid into my black sedan, sat back, and let my hand rest on the steering wheel. I had just been erased from Stratex by a man who didn't even understand the thing he was trying to control. Tyler saw revenue lines on a spreadsheet. He didn't see the 10-year friendship behind each contract, the midnight calls I answered when systems crashed, the weddings, the funerals, the countless handshakes not just signed, but believed in. And now he'd thrown all that away for some cookie-cutter framework he probably read about in a Harvard Business Review article. It would take him less than a week to realize the numbers meant nothing without the man behind them. And by then, I'd already be writing the ending to his chapter. I put the car in reverse. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced down. Brian Coleman. One of my oldest clients. Also one of my oldest friends. The message read: "Lunch tomorrow. Something tells me you've got a hell of a story to tell." I stared at the screen for a second, then smiled. Hell yes, I did. And it was just getting started. By the time the sun dipped behind the western skyline, my bourbon was 3 fingers deep, and the silence of my back deck was the only thing holding me together. The autumn air had that subtle edge of cold, like a warning that something was about to change. The world didn't feel smaller, but it sure as hell felt quieter without the endless stream of Slack pings and budget meetings filling my ears. And that's when my phone started buzzing. The first name that lit up the screen stopped me mid-sip. Brian Coleman. North Spire Apparel. $5 million a year in license fees, logistics integrations, and support contracts. We'd known each other since the first quarter Stratex ever went live. I was the one who flew out to Denver during a snowstorm to help his team implement after their in-house lead quit mid-deployment. We'd spent 5 hours together in a frozen server room and another 3 in a bar talking about regrets and reasons to keep trying. That kind of thing sticks. I answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're not serious," Brian said, skipping the hello. "Tell me you didn't just get fired." I exhaled slowly. "Afraid I can't do that." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Who's the idiot behind this?" "Tyler Voss," I said, sipping again. "New blood. New vision. Same old buzzwords." There was a long pause, then the clinking sound of glass on glass. "The guy who interrupted our dinner last month to pitch cold call automation to my CFO. The very one. He just cut the guy responsible for every smooth year we've had since launch." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "Marcus, that's the dumbest thing I've heard all year. And I've been in procurement negotiations with luxury brands." That made me smile a little. "You know I'm not calling around trying to start anything. Hell, you don't have to. I just got an email from some junior rep trying to introduce himself as my new account manager. I thought it was a scam. I'm not surprised. Well, expect a few more calls tonight. Word's gonna spread." He hung up after promising lunch the next day. Before I could set the phone down, it rang again. Allison Reddick. Tralla Freight. She didn't just sign with us 3 years ago, she took a risk on me when I convinced her to break away from her father's old vendor. I was there when we did the full integration over a single weekend, and I was the one standing next to her at her father's funeral when no one from her leadership team showed up. "Marcus," she said sharply, skipping formalities like always. "I just got a call from someone named Patrick claiming he's my new liaison at Stratex." I sighed. "Yeah. They let me go this afternoon." Dead air. "Then, after the quarter you just gave them?" I didn't answer. This Patrick guy didn't even know what platform we use for internal routing. He asked me if our primary shipment lanes are rail-based. "Rail, Marcus. My entire fleet is digital dispatch." I let her vent. She needed to. They didn't even bother to email me before assigning some stranger, she continued, voice colder now. Like we're interchangeable. Like you're replaceable. You know how it is. No, she snapped. I know how it should be. And this? Isn't it? I heard the scrape of a chair in the background, the echo of an office hallway. She was pacing. Angry. I'm calling Jennifer, she said. I don't care if she's CEO. This isn't just bad business, it's insulting. Ally. No. You came through for us when our East Coast hub nearly collapsed. You rebuilt our entire back-end integration from scratch in 48 hours. You didn't just save our Q3, you saved my job. And now they think I'll sit quietly while they shove someone half-trained into your chair. I took a slow breath. If you need anything, you know how to reach me. But I'm not trying to start a war here. There was a beat of silence. Yeah, she said. But you sure as hell might have just walked into one. When I ended the call, I didn't even have time to lock the screen before the next one came in. Jason Miles. He was the founder of Velodyne, a mid-sized health tech firm with enough bureaucracy to drown a smaller man. I'd helped him navigate their entire HIPAA compliance rollout and stayed on the phone through 3 different vendor breakdowns. I'd been the one to recommend the platform Stratex now build them 7 figures a year to maintain. Marcus, he said, low and deliberate. Some kid just called me to say he's taking over your portfolio. He couldn't pronounce interoperability. I hung up mid-sentence. I couldn't stop the laugh. Sounds about right. What the hell's going on? I gave him the short version. Unreal, he said. I told the kid we were in contract review, just so I didn't have to talk to him. But listen, I've already got legal pulling our agreement. If there's any clause that lets us cut ties early, I want to be ready. You don't have to do that. I do, he said firmly. You were there when our platform glitched in beta and nearly derailed our launch. You found the fix when their engineers were still blaming client-side variables. I don't forget that. That line stuck with me after we hung up, I don't forget that. None of them had. Not the late-night calls. Not the favors. Not the long weekends. Not the quiet loyalty that Tyler had clearly never understood. I didn't ask any of them to leave Stratex. I didn't ask them to threaten legal reviews or demand change. I didn't need to. They weren't reacting to me leaving. They were reacting to the insult of being treated like they didn't matter. At 9:52 p.m., I placed the phone face down and leaned back in my chair. The bottle of bourbon was half empty now. The skyline beyond my backyard was still, indifferent. But something inside me had shifted. I hadn't called a single client. Hadn't pitched myself. Hadn't made a single demand. But the current was already moving. And it wasn't flowing toward Stratex. 3 days later, I found myself sitting across from Jessica Monroe at a quiet corner table inside Basso and Finch, a cafe that pretended not to be expensive. She wore a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse, no jewelry, no frills. Just competence, wrapped in calm. Her presence reminded me of someone who always had 2 backup plans and never needed either. Still drink it black, she asked, gesturing to the cup the waiter had just set in front of me. Still know my habits, I replied, taking a sip. I'd ask how, but I'm guessing someone from your side's been watching the news from mine. Jessica smiled. We don't have to watch. They're calling us. I raised an eyebrow. Clients? Some. Employees. Vendors. Hell, one of your junior analysts cold emailed me a copy of your Q3 case study last night. I leaned back. That's not even public-facing yet. Wasn't. Until someone uploaded it to a vendor portal by accident. I exhaled through my nose. Stratex had always had a talent for burning bridges before looking at the map. Jessica slid a slim folder across the table. Let me cut to it. We've wanted you for a while, Marcus. The board's just been waiting for the moment you became available. I opened the folder. Clean proposal. Bolded title, Director of Strategic Enterprise Relations. Salary, 32% bump over my last contract. 6-person team. Full autonomy to build the department from scratch. No layered approvals. No micromanaging. I looked up. This is aggressive. We don't do timid here. And the non-compete? Jessica didn't miss a beat. Already ran it by legal. Ohio's courts rarely uphold them in termination cases without cause. But to be safe, we start with a 60-day consulting agreement. Official employment begins after. Smart. Surgical. Respectful. I like it, I said, closing the folder. She nodded once, satisfied. Then let's talk about the part you haven't said out loud yet. I tilted my head. Stratex, she said. We don't expect you to burn it down. But if it happens to crumble while you're building something better. I smiled. I'm not interested in revenge. But I am interested in accountability. Jessica grinned. Same destination. Different flight path. We shook hands, and just like that, a door closed behind me while another one opened in front, one I'd build myself, plank by plank. The next morning, I got to work, not as an executive, not yet. But as a strategist. A tactician. I started with what Stratex never saw coming, education. Most of my old clients had no idea they were tethered to their contracts by paper chains. Stratex liked to imply their agreements were ironclad, but I knew every inch of that language. Hell, I'd helped draft the first version of the Master Services template back in the bakery office days. So I put together a document. It wasn't fancy. Just 10 pages, no branding, no signature, no traceable metadata. Just a plain, concise breakdown of what rights clients had under their service agreements. Where exit clauses allowed early termination. How to retrieve their data legally and securely. What to say when someone at Stratex started bluffing with legal jargon. I called it the survival guide. And I didn't distribute it en masse. That would have been sloppy. Instead, I sent it, individually, through encrypted channels, with personal notes like, "Hey Brian, just in case you ever want to audit your contracts. Thought this might help. Allison, if you ever want to double-check compliance terms, this might be useful. Jason, never hurts to be prepared. Let me know if you want to talk through any of this." I wasn't pulling them out. I was putting tools in their hands. If they decided to walk. That was their decision. No fingerprints on mine. Next move, connection. Over the years, I'd never mixed clients. Everyone had their own silos. Their own accounts. Their own sense of loyalty. But what I saw now was that each of them thought they were alone in feeling what they felt. So I set up a series of lunches. Nothing formal. No agendas. Just business owners and execs in similar verticals invited to the same table under the guise of peer networking. No pitch. No slide decks. Just introductions, a reservation, and a quiet smile. The first lunch was 4 people. The second? 8. By the third, someone else had started organizing them for me. And guess what dominated the conversation at every table? Stratex. I never had to bring it up. Someone always did. A bad customer handoff. A broken data export. An unreadable invoice. Everyone had a story, and those stories carried weight when they realized they weren't isolated incidents. By the end of week 2, I'd connected 13 of my 18 major former clients, without asking for anything, without making a single offer. The current was moving. Then came the email. No name. No subject line. Just an encrypted attachment and one line of text. They've done this before. You're not the first. You won't be the last. I should have deleted it. Instead, I opened the file. It was a PDF, scanned pages from what looked like an internal Stratex risk audit dated 5 years ago. Names blacked out. But 3 employees, 2 VPs and a director, had been removed quietly within a year of a failed IPO push. The document suggested they were considered reputation liabilities and flagged for relationship over performance. Sound familiar? One line hit me like ice water. Consistent client over loyalty behavior identified. Strategic termination recommended post-quarter close. And the kicker? That report was co-authored by someone still on the executive team today. They'd done this before. People like me, who built their careers on relationships rather than dashboards, had been surgically excised to make the company look more scalable, less human, right before major valuation events. I sat in the dark of my home office, screen light washing over the bourbon glass on my desk. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. I closed the file. Then I backed it up, twice. One for Jessica. One for me. And I made a note in my journal, underlined in black ink. They erase people like me. But not this time. The fight had already started. And I wasn't just playing defense anymore. 3 weeks into my consulting stint at Falconridge, the new department was starting to look less like a draft on a whiteboard and more like a machine in motion. My 6-person skeleton crew had grown teeth fast, sharp minds, quiet operators. We weren't just building a client relationship division, we were designing something different. A counterweight to the cold, transactional model companies like Stratex believed was scalable. But like any machine built too quickly, the weakness wasn't in the metal. It was in the joints, the people you trust to hold it together. His name was Lucas Shaw. I'd worked with Lucas for years at Stratex. Back then, he was dependable. Analytical, fast-moving, loyal. When I left and started building something new, he was one of the first I reached out to. I told Jessica I trusted him. Put him in charge of process standardization. Let him sit in on every meeting, every framework call, every confidential strategy session. And then the crack started. It began as a whisper. A client email that mentioned a phrase I'd only said aloud in a closed-door meeting 2 days earlier, word for word. A vendor question that felt too aligned with our internal timeline. Subtle things. Isolated, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. I didn't accuse him. Not right away. That wasn't how I operated. I observed. I waited. And I planned. The opportunity came during our 3rd department strategy session, an invite-only meeting I called for key personnel under the guise of refining client migration protocols. I built the entire agenda around one idea: let the traitor expose himself. The room was quiet. Not tense, not suspicious. Just focused. I opened the meeting with a fabricated update. We've been contacted by 3 Stratex clients interested in quiet transitions. One of them, Northbridge Tech, is prepared to move if we can finalize a draft SLA within 5 days. I paused deliberately, glancing at Lucas. He blinked. That was all. I continued, for security reasons, I don't want this discussed outside this room until we lock the handover steps. If this leaks, the deal dies. Heads nodded. Lucas's was the slowest. I gave it 48 hours. On the morning of the 2nd day, Jessica knocked on my office door holding her phone like it had offended her. "You'll want to see this," she said. It was a screenshot of an email. Sent from an encrypted burner account to a Stratex liaison. Subject: Northbridge Movement. The content matched my lie almost perfectly. Timeline, SLA deadline, even the phrase, quiet transition. And the kicker. The IP pinged back to one of Falconridge's internal VPN logins. Mine. Specifically, my division. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before handing it back. "Lucas," I said flatly. Jessica didn't flinch. "Want to handle it quietly?" "No," I replied. "I want the room." Later that afternoon, I called another meeting. Same invite list. Same room. But this time, I walked in last, holding the printout of the leaked email and a second page I hadn't shown anyone yet. Jessica stood in the back, silent witness. She didn't need to say anything. "Before we begin," I said, setting the email copy on the table, "someone in this room passed information to Stratex about a non-existent deal." The silence was nuclear. I scanned their faces, then turned to Lucas. "Northbridge never contacted us. The whole thing was bait. A test. And someone bit." Lucas's eyes flickered. Then he scoffed, too quickly. "You're saying I did this?" he asked, laughing dryly. "That's insane." I held up the second page. That IP address that accessed our VPN at 2:06 a.m. It was your credentials, Lucas. Not even masked properly. He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed 18 companies who trusted us with their future. You didn't leak strategy, you leaked trust. And that doesn't come back." No one spoke. Not even Jessica. Lucas stood up slowly. "You brought me in. You made me believe this was about rebuilding something. You used my loyalty." "No," I said, standing as well. "You sold it." "For what?" "A promise from Tyler that you'd get my seat if I failed." That shut him up. I turned to the rest of the room. Falconridge is about relationships. We don't play games in the dark. We don't send knives in the mail. If anyone else wants to report to Tyler Voss, now's your chance to walk out with him. No one moved. Lucas left. Quietly. No goodbye. Just the soft click of the door and the weight he took with him. That evening, I walked straight to Jessica's office and handed over the final folder I'd been assembling since week 1. It was titled, Client Obstruction Patterns, Evidence Package A. Inside were documented cases, screenshots, client emails, legal correspondences, of Stratex deliberately delaying or denying client transitions. Every case matched a story from one of my former clients. Data exports, mysteriously unavailable, the moment a termination was filed. API access revoked mid-migration. Billing systems changed retroactively to block refunds. Jessica scanned a few pages, then looked up. "We can go legal with this." "We will," I said. "But not yet." She raised a brow. "I want it to explode when it matters most." And I knew exactly when that would be. 1 week later, the annual East Coast Tech Infrastructure Conference kicked off in Baltimore. Every major player from our space was there, vendors, analysts, press. And Stratex, of course, with a shiny new booth and 2 keynote panels. It was the perfect storm. I coordinated with Brian, Allison, and 2 other former clients. At noon on day 2, during Tyler Voss's panel on Client-Driven Growth Models, a video was uploaded simultaneously across LinkedIn, Twitter, and the industry's internal newsletter. It featured Allison. Recorded in one take, sitting at her desk. "When Stratex lost our trust, we tried to leave quietly. They delayed our data, rewrote our invoices, and told us we didn't have a right to what we'd already paid for. This isn't just bad business. It's predatory." The video had 0 branding. No call to action. Just a statement of fact. Within an hour, it had over 40,000 views. By nightfall, it trended on 3 professional forums. The next morning, I received a message from a longtime Stratex client I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Marcus, I didn't know it was this bad. Can we talk? The noose was tightening. And for the first time, I wasn't the one inside it. A month after the video dropped, the dominoes fell like they'd been greased. Stratex lost 3 clients the first week, big ones. By the end of the second week, that number had jumped to 9. Some gave reasons like realignment of vendor relationships. Others didn't bother with an excuse. But I knew every name, every account, every line item. These weren't just losses. They were fractures. Pressure cracks in a structure built on artificial confidence. By week 4, 15 of my original 18 clients had signed with Falconridge. The final 3 were in final stages of negotiation, and 2 of them had already attended our new client workshops. They were just waiting for the paperwork to clear. On paper, Falconridge was booming. But it wasn't just the numbers. Something deeper was happening. Clients weren't just moving to escape Stratex, they were moving toward us. Toward transparency. Toward a team that treated them like partners, not line items on a spreadsheet. The mission I'd envisioned was finally real. Which is why the email from Jennifer Briggs, CEO of Stratex, landed like an echo from a past life. It came through my personal inbox at 6:42 a.m. on a Thursday. Subject, a conversation worth having. Short. Clean. Professional. Just like her. Marcus. I realize this message may be overdue. I would like to meet and discuss a potential return to Stratex in an executive leadership role. Let me know if you're open to talking. Jennifer. I read it twice before setting my phone down. The same Jennifer who once told a room full of analysts that people come and go, but revenue defines value. Now she wanted to talk. I didn't reply right away. I let the silence stretch. That afternoon, she called. Marcus, her voice was smooth, practiced. I hope you got my note. I did. And? I've been busy. She chuckled. So I've heard. Congratulations on the momentum at Falconridge. Thank you. I won't waste your time, she continued. We'd like to bring you back. I leaned against the window of my office, watching the city hum beneath me. In what capacity? I asked, though I already knew. Executive Vice President, she said. You'd report directly to me. Full control over strategic accounts, and we're prepared to offer double your previous compensation. No hesitation. No negotiation. Just a blank check and a title. And Tyler? I asked. A beat of silence. He's no longer with us. Of course not. The leaks had become impossible to contain. Screenshots of his emails outlining client retention blockades had been passed around the industry like trading cards. One memo in particular, subject line, leverage data friction, had made its way into an internal ethics forum, then to a journalist I used to brief under NDA. It wasn't a resignation. It was a purge. And Jennifer? She was in cleanup mode. I'm flattered, I said finally, keeping my tone even. But the answer's no. Her voice tightened. You haven't heard the full offer. I don't need to. Marcus, this is a chance to rebuild, together. You'd be able to undo the damage that's been done. I'm not interested in rebuilding something that never valued what I built in the first place. She exhaled, sharp and short. That's unfair. No, I said. What was unfair was watching my name erased from the story I helped write. What was unfair was being treated like overhead after 7 years of making your revenue look easy. Her tone softened. We made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, Jennifer. You made a choice. You chose buzzwords over people. You chose Tyler. Another pause. We need you, Marcus. No, I said, calm and final. You need what I represent. But that can't be bought back with a title and a salary. She tried once more, quietly. Would you at least consider consulting? Helping us stabilize the client base? I almost laughed. You want me to fix the damage done by the person who replaced me? While you still try to pretend I was just another account manager. No, Goodbye, Jennifer. I ended the call. She didn't try again. That night, I opened a bottle of Glendronach 18 I'd been saving. Jessica joined me on the balcony outside our office floor. The view stretched across the river, and the city lights blinked like a constellation that had finally shifted in our favor. Briggs reached out, she asked, sipping her own glass. She did. And? I told her I don't work for ghosts. Jessica smiled. Stratex lost 7 accounts this week. And that's just the ones we know about. They built everything on borrowed trust, I said. Eventually, the debt came due. She nodded. You've earned this, Marcus. All of it. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked down at the city, my city now, in a way it never had been before. Legal's almost done reviewing your board candidacy, she added. They're impressed. I turned to her. You pushing it? I don't have to, she said. The numbers speak. You built something real. The kind of thing that doesn't just grow revenue, it anchors it. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I felt something shift again. Not relief. Not pride. Clarity. The next morning, an internal memo went out across Falconridge. Subject, Board Nomination, Marcus Hale. It was brief. Just enough to confirm what the floor already knew. By lunchtime, 4 department heads dropped by my office to shake my hand. One brought cookies. Another brought a bottle of small batch rye with a bow on it. None of them needed to say it aloud. I'd come in to build a department. I'd built a movement instead. As for Stratex, their stock stalled. Not crashed, just stuck. Industry confidence plateaued. Rumors swirled about acquisition talks, merger options. Quiet panic, dressed in professional PR statements. Their clients had learned something simple but powerful: once you realize your vendor doesn't value you, it's hard to pretend otherwise. And once the industry realized I wasn't just gone, I was thriving, people started making calls. Not to Stratex. To us. The past month had been war fought with no armies. Just trust, broken and rebuilt. And if Jennifer had hoped to turn the tide with a single offer, she'd forgotten one simple truth. People like me don't come back to burn bridges. We build better ones somewhere else. And we make damn sure they last. 3 months later, I walked through the glass doors of what used to be Stratex Systems. The same building where I'd once arrived early, stayed late, and believed I was part of something being built, something that mattered. Now, the old logo was gone, replaced by a simple black plaque that read: Falconridge, Cincinnati Branch. The acquisition had closed quietly but decisively. Falconridge hadn't bought the name. We didn't need the name. What we wanted was the infrastructure, its back-end stack, a few niche engineers, and the regional presence. What we inherited, unintentionally, was the soul Stratex had long since lost. They were forced to sell after months of hemorrhaging accounts, talent, and credibility. By the end, their board didn't fight it. They just wanted out. During negotiations, I had one non-financial condition. One thing, I told Jessica and the acquisition team. No one gets fired like I was. Her brow rose. You want to keep their staff? I want to give them the chance I never got, I said. Every employee, regardless of title or tenure, gets interviewed. Fairly. By us. If they're good, they stay. If not, they walk away with dignity. She didn't argue. I wasn't doing it for redemption. I was doing it because people deserved better than being deleted in a conference room and escorted out like a liability. That morning, as I walked through the newly branded hallways, I saw a few familiar faces. Not all met my eyes. Some did, and nodded. In the main conference room, now stripped of its old fake cherrywood paneling, nearly 80 employees sat shoulder to shoulder. Some anxious. Some defiant. Some just, tired. I stood at the front, the window behind me pouring in the same light I remembered from the day Tyler Voss fired me. Funny how sunlight could look so different through a new lens. I didn't use a mic. I didn't need one. My name's Marcus Hale, I began, hands in my pockets. Most of you know who I am. Some of you know who I used to be. A few faces shifted. I'm not here to clean house, I said. I'm here to rebuild one. That made a few eyes lift. I stood in this room once as someone being removed. Not because I failed. But because I didn't fit the new model. And then I watched the company bleed away everything that had made it work in the first place, quietly, politely, like losing its soul one policy at a time. Silence. I let it settle. Now, Falconridge owns this building. But ownership is not the same as leadership. And leadership doesn't erase the past. It repurposes it. I took a breath, scanned the room. I don't care what badge you wore yesterday. What I care about is how you show up tomorrow. We'll interview every one of you. Fairly. No tricks. No ambushes. You'll get a chance to prove who you are. A quiet murmur passed through the crowd. Disbelief. Then slow acceptance. And if you're here to collect a check and wait out the clock, I added, that's fine. But not here. This office won't be run by fear or silence. It'll be run on trust. I paused again. Because trust, I said, isn't printed on performance reports. It's shown. Over and over. Until someone believes you mean it. No applause. Just a room full of people realizing they weren't going to be erased. Somewhere in the back, a woman wiped at her eye. Later that day, I walked through the old sales floor. My old desk was still there, though stripped of the things that had made it mine. No photos. No mug. No chipped baseball from Jason. I stood by the window. The skyline of Cincinnati was identical to the one I'd looked at 3 months earlier, bourbon in hand, just fired. Same buildings. Same light. Same weather. But I wasn't the same. My name was on a different door now. And more importantly, so was my voice. A buzz in my pocket. Brian Coleman. The text read. Looks like the guy who used to take our calls is now the one deciding who answers them. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then replied. I didn't win, Brian. I just survived the right way. That night, I didn't celebrate. I went home, poured a glass of bourbon, and sat with the quiet. This hadn't been revenge. It had been correction. A course set straight not by fury, but by focus. By patience. By the quiet strength of letting others reveal who they are when they think no one's watching. Stratex didn't fall because I sabotaged them. They fell because they forgot that loyalty isn't a line item, and relationships don't scale when they're treated like formulas. Never underestimate the power of the unseen. The person who drives your revenue today could walk out tomorrow, carrying your reputation with them.